Hey everybody, this is Jero from the Beyond Taboo podcast in Jolt to Grow, and I'm here with Xavi, our new penal training coach who has just joined the team. How are you doing, Xavi? Everything well?
I'm fine. I'm fine, and I'm happy of being to be a part of this.
You're most welcome, and we're happy to have you in the team with all the experience you brought to the table. And today we were wondering if we could talk about considering you have been for quite a while in this whole journey, the whole penal training journey, I think it could be a great idea to talk about some exercises, any tips you might have for either newcomers or most experienced users. I know you are like an advocate of manual training exercises.
Okay.
So I think that could be an interesting topic considering, more and more every day, devices are gaining a lot of attention. So I wonder if somehow we are not giving much attention to manual training. What do you think about that?
Okay, it's an interesting question. I think that manual and mechanical are both good options. I usually prefer to start
Hmm.
with manual and then switch to mechanical devices later.
Hmm.
This is because I find that developing in Italian it's called propriocezione, perception of yourself,
Oh, okay.
of how your body respond is a key to understand if you are doing an exercise which is an efficacious one.
Hmm.
And manual techniques allows you to have more control on how much effort you are putting in
Hmm.
each single exercise.
That's true.
So
That's true.
if I'm doing a stretch, I can calibrate and change the force I'm using according to what my body is saying to me.
Hmm.
While if I use an extender, the effort is always the same. So
Hmm.
starting with a mechanical extender maybe won't allow you to understand if you are working too low or too much.
Hmm.
So first of all, you need to understand how your body responds and what are the sensation of a good work. Then
Yeah,
you
that's a good
can
point.
translate that on a mechanical exercise, which allows you to use a more intense effort.
Hmm.
But if you start with with a mechanical device, it's maybe easier to cause an injury
Hmm.
if you're
Also
using too
that.
much effort, for
Yeah.
example. Okay, so I'm a strong advocate of not hurting yourself.
Yeah, that should
So
be
everything
a
must
top
be
priority.
progressive.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, everything
Well,
must be progressive. So start soft and then go harder and harder if your body allows for that.
Perfect. I think you're touching on an interesting topic here, Xavi. Before we dive into the specifics of recommended exercises you might have, um, two things popped up in my mind. The first one is, you mentioned that first you like to instruct clients or beginners to perform just manual exercises as a preliminary or initial phase and then jump to mechanical, which reminds me of how things were proposed in Thunder's place, you know? I recall that on probably maybe the Italian section of Thunder's place was a bit different, I'm not sure. But if I recall right, there's a lot of members, and even on the beginners routines, um, well, more veteran members always say it's better to start with manuals for sure, to first get used to, well, the sensations, understand how your body reacts, you know, get the grip of the whole mechanical part of the principles, what feels right, what feels wrong, but also for your penis to get used to the training. So I recall lots of members saying, for example, that devices should be left for maybe, and I know sometimes formulas don't work well for everybody, but as a recommendation, I saw lots of people saying that probably, yeah, mechanical training or device-based training should be left for those harder to get gains and for when your penis is ready for that, like you're prepared.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is also my philosophy. The tissues you are working on at the beginning can't be stretched out too much and too fast.
Hmm.
So they need to be conditioned progressively.
Hmm.
So as it is as for the gym, we were saying that on our previous podcast. You don't go for a bench press like a strongman on the first day you go to the gym.
Hmm.
Maybe you start understanding the mechanical of an exercise.
Hmm.
You do that without even without weight
Hmm.
to understand how to do that, and then you add weight and weight and weight. Okay,
Okay.
this is good not only to avoid injuries, not only mm, because uh, maybe you can obtain more with less
Hmm.
effort,
Good
but
point.
also because if you already start with a particularly intense routine and then you reach a plateau, where will you go from
Hmm.
there?
Hmm.
Okay, so better to start with less, take all you can with mild or soft exercise,
Hmm.
gain all you can from that, and then when you reach a plateau from that, then you switch to something more intense.
Okay.
And usually mechanical devices are more intense. So
Okay.
good for those who have reached a plateau and have already conditioned tissues.
Okay. And for example, I really like this perspective because, well, I like thinking this is how things should be done. I mean, it's the most safest path to training somehow. But despite that, we get to see lots of brands, and which is all right because there's people trying to sell their products. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this should be step one or the only approach to enlargement, you know? So I think it's great to keep these things in mind. And obviously, it might require to befriend the idea that this will take some time and it will be a process. And you should, like, I don't know, embrace the journey somehow. It will be certainly an experiment. But I wanted to ask you because you mentioned devices for moments like hitting a plateau. How do you know it's time to try a device, considering, for example, there's so much exercises available to try if a given exercise is already not working? Let's say, for example, someone's started out with jogging, and it seems to at some point stopped working. For example, I don't know, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But what would make you direct someone to using a device instead of trying a different exercise of the big repertoire we have available? Which reminds me,
Yeah.
guys, don't forget we have around 40 tutorials on our Culture Grow Academy, full of tutorials. And there are plenty there, even for girth or length. So how do you approach that specific situation?
Yes, this is a difficult choice. My approach, and I don't know if it's the right one, it's just my approach,
Uh-huh.
is to first of all try something more intense but still manual
Okay,
before going to full mechanical.
that's a great way. Yeah.
And it's not forbidden to mix manual and mechanical. I did that for a long time. So, for example, if you if you're starting to do a jelking routine, okay, and you see you have no more results on that,
Mhm.
first thing is you can perform the same jelking at a higher grade of erection if your body allows that. You can slow the motion of the squeezing. Okay. So if you're normally using a 2 or 3 second squeeze for each hand, you can lower it to 5 or 7 or 10 second each squeeze. Okay.
Hmm.
You can add not just you can do the squeezing not just with the okay grip, but add a second
That's interesting.
finger,
Finger.
okay,
Hmm.
and do the same with 2 fingers or 3. Okay, these are all ways to use the same exercise, making it more intense. Okay, and when all these things doesn't work at all, then I switch to mechanical exercise. But as I said, there is no there are no dogma. This is not a faith. Okay, so my suggestion is and always be you have to experiment. Okay,
Okay.
and see what works for you. For a long time in my experience, I did a mix of manual stretching, then jerking, then extender at the end.
Hmm.
Okay, so the manual stretching at the beginning was just to condition the tissues,
Okay.
then switching to jerking to add some girth stimulation, and then again go to the stretching with more intensity at the end.
Hmm.
Obviously, this is possible just for an advanced practitioner.
Hmm.
Okay, if you add too much too early, this won't be efficacious. You will just overtrain, and it's not the correct way. Okay,
Okay.
this is just when you reach a plateau.
Okay. Makes
Then you
sense.
experiment and see what will make you gain again.
Okay. Makes sense. Talking about plateaus. I'd love to touch on the topic um, of, well, about, I'd love to talk about um, how, for example, when things start to get intense too early, how
Mhm.
tissues sort of strengthen so much they become less responsive to the exercises, which is something that usually happens to guys that are starting out and they start lifting 2.5 kilos from day one with their hangers. And
Yeah.
then they just find that they can just grow. So I'd love to talk about that related, for example, to uh, gains after rest, or I think they're called rebound gains, maybe, I'm not sure.
Um,
And
okay.
how those are, because there are different scenarios I'd love to talk about, for example, the newbie gains when you, for example, hit a plateau, you give yourself
Mhm.
some time to rest, you resume
Yeah.
your training, and suddenly there's more gains. And a third scenario, I mean, I'd love if we could relate and reflect about all these things all together. What happens when you sort of um, start too heavy, and tissues become like so stiff you can't work with them. So maybe there's something there, a common point, probably how tissues behave, that we can talk about this, like from that angle.
Okay. So basically, your body always search for a sort of homeostasis. Okay. So to equilibrate, okay, and to develop itself in order to sustain what you ask from him, from it. Okay. So if you exercise too much and which with too much intensity from the beginning and you overtrain, you can understand you are doing such a things because there are signs you can recognize you are doing something wrong. Okay. The consistency of your tissues in this case become something like gummy. Okay. They develop some resistance.
Okay.
Okay. You can experience something like tartling, okay, which it is a retraction, okay, of your penis, okay, when you are resting. Okay, these are signs you are doing too much. Okay, while there are signs you are performing your exercises well.
Hmm.
This is when your tissues remain flexible
Okay.
and you are probably experiencing a good erection.
Hmm.
And when you
Also
are
important.
in a flaccid state, your penis appear a little bit elongated and not
Okay.
retracted.
Hmm.
Okay, this way you can understand you are working toward the right direction.
Okay.
Um,
Makes
as
sense.
for as for the phenomenon of the resting and then
The gains
breaking
again.
a plateau after a rest. This is really, really, it's an interesting thing that I noticed for lots of different people. So this for me is something that make you understand how your body works and how these exercises works.
Hmm.
Basically, the philosophy or
The
I developed
principles.
the
Hmm.
principles I developed in these years is that you have to condition the tissues and then try to put more and more effort up to a certain point, reach,
Progressively. Okay.
yeah, reach a peak of intensity,
Hmm.
and then go on a rest. Okay,
Okay.
this way you provide the cells on your body the right stimulation to create more tissue.
Hmm.
But the tissue you will develop is not developed when you are exercising.
Hmm.
The tissue you develop will be developed when you are resting.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting.
And your body needs the rest to heal and create new tissues. This is why when you restart again, you will experience more gains
Okay. Okay. Makes
because you
sense.
have more tissue to work with. And
Mm.
your tissues are healed.
Makes sense. So how do you go back to training from there, you know? I mean, if your previous point was hitting the peak of your in terms of intensity, how do you resume your training after the rest, you know? I mean, what should be an ideal starting point after your rest in terms of repetition amount or time training, you know, or I'm not sure, and this is also another question, uh, how you should count, for example, exercises like jogging, because sometimes people, for example, okay, you finished your cycle of training with, I don't know, 300 strokes of the jog
Yeah.
exercise.
Mm.
Some
Yeah.
people uh, better prefer to think about jogging in terms of minutes.
Yeah.
So going back to my initial question, what's an ideal starting point after your rest? And for those type of exercises like the jog, how do you think they should be better approach in terms of counting?
Okay, so there are two different questions. The first one, okay, there is again, there is not only one answer. Okay, the principle to me is after your rest, and your rest should be for me at least after 4 weeks, an entire week of rest, and sometimes maybe even more than 1 week, depending on the person.
Mm.
And after this week of deconditioning the tissues, when you restart, you can't start at your peak. So you will need at least 1 week of reconditioning. Okay.
Okay.
It,
Mm.
it depends on what was the last program you did in the previous month. Okay.
Okay.
So if, for example, I started with let's say 30 minutes of jelking at your peak week during the last week of your month, then you do a week of rest and then restart maybe with the first week starting with 20 minutes,
Hmm. Okay.
and then during the first week go to the point in which at the end of the first week you have reached the 30 minutes you
Okay.
finished with the previous
Perfect.
month. Okay,
Perfect.
so that at the beginning of the second week you are doing already a routine similar to the one you have
You were
finished in
doing. Okay.
the previous month. Okay,
Fantastic.
this is a general principle. Okay,
Okay.
but it depends from case to case. As to the question on for me how it is best to count the jerking, for example,
The
I
repetitions?
prefer, yeah, I prefer to not count the single squeeze, the single stroke,
Oh,
but to count the minutes. This is because if I count the stroke, my mind is set to, okay, I need to do this and this. And I prefer for the people to focus on the feeling of how
that's
of how
a
I
very interesting approach.
how my body is feeling. Okay,
Hmm.
so I don't need to count mentally.
Hmm.
Okay,
Which
I need
which
to
can
feel that,
distract you.
yeah, each squeeze must be good, must feel good. So I don't want to focus on the counting. Okay,
Hmm.
but this is my approach. Okay,
Hmm.
because for example, if you are in a good day, let's say 300 strokes, are different from 300 strokes done in a bad day. Okay, this is not a good way to count for me.
That's a good point.
You have to feel you are doing a good exercise, and you have to feel it in your body, not in your mind, not counting. You're fooling yourself if you say so, if you think so.
Yeah, that's right. I tried those two approaches, and counting rep by rep certainly distracts you. And sometimes you forget where you were at. And so you just go back and well, things start to get frustrating. And that's
Yeah,
certainly
for
not the
example,
right.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
you can have difficulties in maintaining the right grade of action, for example, if you are
Yeah,
doing the count.
that's true.
So
That's true. Better have
yeah,
like
so
a
not for
timer
me.
and put 15 minutes and let the phone or the app tell you when to stop.
Yeah, you just focus on the flow. You feel your body working in a certain way, and you can enjoy what you're doing.
Mm,
Jelking is an enjoyable exercise for me, so
mm,
it's important for it to remain enjoyable.
mm.
I don't like to count.
Makes sense. You know, I have two more questions before we wrap up this episode. And the first one would still be related to the topic we're talking about. How do you manage time considering that, well, as time passes and you accomplish and complete different training cycles, you usually start from not always half of the previous cycle, but close to it. So sometimes you sort of need more time and more time, because like following the example you previously gave, like you finished your first cycle with 30 minutes of choking. So you continue your second cycle on the first week, starting from 20 minutes. But let's say you finish your second cycle and you're about to start your third cycle at, I don't know, 30. At some point, you're training 2 hours, which
Yeah.
becomes a little bit difficult for most people. So, how do you manage time to avoid losing efficiency?
Mm. Okay, so the answer is an ideal program to me shouldn't last more than 40 up to 60 minutes in general. Okay, so when you reach a certain amount of time spent doing your exercise, the trick is not just to add time and time doing the same exercise, but to switch to a more intense way to perform the same exercise.
Okay, makes
Maybe
sense.
going back to less time with a more intense
More
variation.
strength or different grip or
Yeah,
whatever.
this
Okay.
this is especially true when it comes to manual exercises. While for a certain mechanical stimulation, as for example extender or the all day long sleeve, for example,
Hmm.
you can actually do lots of time with it. But this is true just for the passive exercises or the low intensity exercises. Okay, for the core of the program, to me, it shouldn't last more than 1 hour
Okay, makes sense.
generally.
That's a great advice. Yeah. Well, I think we could totally touch on the topic for another episode, like passive methods, something that sparks a lot of interest on the internet, certainly. But leaving that question aside for future conversations, I'd love to ask you about rings. I know I'm not sure now, but at least you were like a big ring enthusiast. So yeah, I'd love to. I mean, there's a couple of articles on our blog that you guys can check out, like how to creatively use rings to your training, either as a post-training measure or during training, you know. But I'd love to hear a little bit or learn about your personal approach to cock rings.
Okay, so actually, I didn't use those for lots of time. Okay.
Okay.
This is a thing that I started to use up to a certain point, and from then on. And I actually didn't use proper cock rings, but something different. Okay, I used elastic bands. Okay,
Hmm.
uh, but rings
The
are
same
good.
principle.
Same principle, okay. It's always a sort of clamping. The
Hmm.
principle is to obviously constrict the
Blood
blood
flow.
and the lymphatic fluids to remain inside your shaft and not to wear off. Okay.
Hmm.
To me, this has to add rings to your routine as sense for the most part when you are working on girth, obviously. And I love to use the clamping or ring at the end of a session when my tissues are at their max capacity. Okay, they have reached a certain volume. When they have reached that, I put on the ring
Hmm.
and it remains swollen up for a
Hmm.
long period of time. This way, conditioning the tissues to remain expanded and
Hmm.
to develop more and more volume during time.
So in a sense, it could be pretty much like using a silicone sleeve, which is used
Mhm.
for keeping like an elongated state afterwards,
Yeah.
but for girth in a sense, not
Yeah,
so much
yeah,
for length.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, the silicone sleeves is the same principle for length, and the cock rings or clamping are for girth and for length, since actually it's develop the volume in general, so both girth and length,
Hmm.
but especially girth. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So, Xavi, I think we have covered pretty much a lot of topics. So, I appreciate your time today and, well, you bringing us all this experience about, well, how we should manage training cycles, rest, the use of devices, how we should start and give the importance manual training needs to pave a safe journey towards good results in a sense. So we have touched on great topics, and thank you for being here today, Xavi. And guys, just to remember you, we have we still have 4 slots with Xavi to start training. So keep that in mind because we are getting a lot of questions. And well, if you have any more questions that you would like the coach to respond, let us know on the comments or either by email, and we'll address those on the following episode. So thanks, Xavi, for being here today, and you guys for watching us.